Gene Hackman was one of the first actors I remember taking note of. I can't tell you how young I was the first time I saw Superman. 4, 5, something like that. And obviously, of course, when you're a kid, especially, you watch Superman, and the first person you notice and the impression you come away with is mostly centered on Superman and Christopher Reeve. And of course, I love Christopher Reeve and I love his portrayal of Superman to this day. But you also can't miss Gene Hackman as Lex Luthor. And so from a very young age, I knew who Gene Hackman was. And when I would see him in other things as I grew and watched more films and became more aware of the world, he was a face and a name that I always sort of perked up at. Oh, Gene Hackman's in this. He was just one of the first actors that really captured my interest. And now that I've had a day or so to think about it since the news broke of his death, the passing of Gene Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arakawa, under mysterious, suspicious, shocking circumstances. I'm not going to get into that. I don't want to talk about that right now. I don't really know anything about that at this point, as I'm sitting here recording this video. Nobody except perhaps the people investigating it really know anything about it. So I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about Gene Hackman as an actor and why he meant so much to me, why I think he meant so much to so many people. He was one of those actors that pretty much everybody can agree on. Like, you have to look really, really hard to find someone who wouldn't think that Gene Hackman was a fantastic actor. Like, not just a pretty good actor or an actor who wouldn't screw things up if he was in a movie, but like legitimately one of the best you've ever seen. Like, almost everybody had that incredibly high opinion of him. And I think, obviously it's difficult to articulate exactly why, and it's difficult to boil down his appeal into some simple essence that can just be easily expressed. But if I were going to foolishly try to do that, I think it comes down to his emotional range and versatility. He wasn't a chameleon as an actor. There are brilliant actors who are chameleons, who change drastically with every role. Meryl Streep, a brilliant actor. Nobody would ever say, at least nobody who had any taste, would ever say that Meryl Streep was anything other than a brilliant actor. And she's been something of a chameleon throughout her career. She has changed her appearance. She has done different voices, done different accents, changed the look of her hair, changed the look of her body. Like, she has changed herself physically and in terms of her vocal performance to fit different characters. And she has a wide range of characters that she has created. Robert De Niro, there's another one. Lost weight, gained weight, got into shape, got out of shape, changed his appearance, wore makeup at times. Gary Oldman, there's another one. Lawrence Fishburne, before he became Neo and kind of settled in. Like, if you look at some of Lawrence Fishburne's earlier performances, played all kinds of different characters in all kinds of different ways, Viola Davis, again, now that she has sort of attained a certain status and has finally gotten the success that she has very much richly deserved for her entire career, she's kind of settled into more standard types. But if you look at her earlier career, much more of a chameleon, right? So there are actors, and obviously there are tons more, probably even better examples than the ones I've just said, of actors who just, they disappear into the role and you never know what they're going to do next. And they might change their appearance through special effects makeup or through controlling their weight or changing their hair or whatever, but they look and they act and they seem different in every role they play. Gene Hackman was not that kind of an actor. He would change his appearance here and there, depending on the role. He might grow a mustache or change the length of his hair. And obviously, the costuming would change depending on the character and depending on the film. But he pretty much always just looked like Gene Hackman. And he pretty much always just acted like Gene Hackman. He played characters that were more or less the same type from movie to movie to movie. It was Gene Hackman. That was his persona. That was his tone. That was the way he was. And yet, it would be completely unfair to describe him as anything other than a versatile actor, because he had an amazing emotional range. Yes, you were always getting Gene Hackman, but he could be funny. He was so funny. I do kind of wish, he had his career was incredible. It's hard to look at Gene Hackman's career as a film fan and be like, oh, I wish he'd done a little more of this or that. He gave us so much. But I do sometimes wish that he had done more comedy, because when he did comedy, he was so good at it. He was so funny. Remember him in as the blind hermit in Young Frankenstein. My God, was he funny. Lex Luthor, I mentioned him as Lex Luthor at the beginning of this video. So funny as Lex, so perfectly funny as Lex, and funny in a completely different way than he was funny in Young Frankenstein. He could make you laugh in different ways, and he was so quick, and he had such control over his instrument and his face and his being on film that he could make you laugh in so many different ways. He could be scary. He could be domineering and dominating. He could be the kind of guy that you wouldn't even want to be in the same room with. He could be an utter piece of shit. He could be an asshole. He could be scary. He could be a scumbag. He could be completely beyond redemption. And he could be the absolute vision of courage and decency. And he could be complicated. He could be morally ambiguous. And he often was. Many of his more memorable roles are playing characters that are kind of stuck between the light and dark poles of morality. But he could be heroic or he could be villainous. And he could be villainous as a cartoon character, or he could be villainous in a chillingly true-to-life seeming way. Think of the roles he won Oscars for. He won Best Actor in 1972 for The French Connection, which had come out the year before, where he played Popeye Doyle, who was technically the good guy in that movie, but was such an unpleasant person. He's the good guy. He's the cop who's chasing after the infamous global drug kingpin, right? He's the good guy, but he's such an asshole. He's brutal. He's racist. He's cynical. He's utterly obsessed and single-minded. He's just not a very pleasant character. But Gene Hackman's performance as that character is peerless, is brilliant. He is so good and so believable as this dirtbag New York cop who is the hero but is very unheroic in many ways. And then 20 years later, he wins Best Supporting Actor for Unforgiven, playing the sheriff in Unforgiven, the antagonist, Little Bill. And again, a very unpleasant character, not in the same way that Popeye Doyle is unpleasant. Popeye Doyle, his character in The French Connection, is unpleasant for his personal habits and his bigotry and just his personal vibe, right? He's an unpleasant person to be around. Little Bill is unpleasant because of his capacity for cruelty, because of how malicious he is, because of how cutting he can be with his words and with his actions, because of how cold and merciless he can be. And yet at the same time, there are scenes in that movie where he is so engaging and likable. And you can see how this guy, for as dark as his soul is, you can see how this guy got to be in the position that he is in, how he got to be a respected lawman, how he got to be a pillar of the community, how he got to earn people's respect, not just their fear, but their respect, because he is capable of presenting himself as this very likable, gregarious person, even though he is also simultaneously capable of being a ruthless killer. It's, again, an amazing performance and a very, very justly rewarded and lauded performance. But they're both Gene Hackman. You watch The French Connection, you watch Unforgiven, two completely different characters, and yet both instantly recognizable as Gene Hackman. You watch The Conversation. Again, completely different character from either of those two characters I've just been talking about. Harry Call, his character in The Conversation, completely different guy. Neurotic, obsessed, just like Little Bill and Popeye Doyle were, but obsessed in a different way, obsessed with different things, much more reserved and closed off and private, much more of an emotionally controlled performance, much more inscrutable character. But still, Gene Hackman, that's who you were getting when you cast Gene Hackman. He could play to the cheap seats and chew all the scenery in sight. And he could be so subtle that you barely even noticed what he was doing. And the thing that made him a great actor was that you never saw him acting. He was such an instinctive, natural actor. And that goes back to he's always it feels like he's always kind of playing himself, even though he's playing vastly different characters from movie to movie. He always kind of looks the same. He always kind of sounds the same. He always feels like, well, that's just Gene Hackman. Because you don't see him acting. He's not a show-offy kind of actor. He's a get down to business kind of actor. And I defy anyone to look through his filmography, especially look through his most notable roles, and find me one false note that he ever played that made it into a film. I'm sure like any actor, I'm sure he had bad takes from time to time. He must have. Like, I don't know for sure, but he must have. But none of them ever made it into the final cut, did they? At least I don't think so. I defy anyone to show me a false note or a false moment that ever came from a Gene Hackman performance. He always seemed utterly real on film. He always seemed like he was the person that he was portraying. He wasn't acting, he was living whatever part he was playing. And that is such a gift that an actor can give an audience. And that is such a mark of high art. You know, when an actor can do that, that's an artist. And I don't think he thought of himself that way. I don't think he was pretentious about his work. But that's part of the reason why it was so goddamn good. Because I don't think he overthought it. I think he was instinctive as an actor. And that's what made him great. But emotional range, my God. He could play anything in terms of emotional range. And he could make you laugh, he could make you smile, he could inspire you, and he could chill you to your bones. Always while just seeming like himself. And that's a rare person. That's a rare performer. And I knew as soon as I heard about his death that I had to say something about it. Not for anybody else, but for me. I don't believe that there's anybody who's been sitting on the edge of their seat going, oh, I wonder what Steve's going to say about Gene Hackman. Like, I think most of you who subscribe to my channel and watch my videos regularly or semi-regularly, at best, maybe had a passing interest of, oh, I wonder if Steve will make a video about Gene Hackman. Nobody's on the edge of their seat to hear what some random dipshit on YouTube thinks about Gene Hackman. But for me, just for me, because he was so special, and because me and his work do go back so far to when I was a little kid and I first saw him play Lex Luthor in Superman. And then I grew up a little and I saw him in Mississippi Burning, or I saw him in Unforgiven, or I saw him in The French Connection, or I saw him in The Conversation, or Crimson Tide, or The Firm, or Enemy of the State, or Heist, or pick one. Absolute Power. I mean, and not all of these are great films. Some of these are kind of mediocre films. But Hackman is always untouchable, as he will always be.
Hey, that's the Chiefs. The Chiefs got it.